three, four. Welcome to C Sharp Programming on .NET. My name is Brett Robley. I teach at Cal State University Fullerton, and this is ISDS 309. Tonight we're going to create a program that will create a name file with fixed width names of 10 characters each, and then in a subsequent lesson I'm going to show you how to search for those. Now here's the names.txt file. This is what the objective is to create this file with names in it. And notice the cursor, I'm going past the end of the name and it goes out to 10 characters and then it goes down to the next line. You obviously can't see the spaces, but you can see their effect when you cursor through. Now I'm going to delete the names.txt file so that you can see it actually gets created in the file system. And now let's go open Visual Studio and whoops. Let me try that again. There we go. Okay, and let's create a new project and let's call it CreateNameFile. Let's remove the unnecessary code. And let's use our static system.console. And since we're working with files, let's use our system.io. Now let's create an application class. Let's call it CreateNameFile. Let's set up our main method. And now in this program, I'm going to show you how to check for file existence so that we don't overwrite a file that we might want to keep, and how to interact with the user to ask them if it's okay to overwrite a file. So I'm going to set up file name as a string and I'm going to set it to null, and you'll see why in a minute. And IntelliSense keeps trying to help me type, and so if I hit escape and then hit the period and then type length, then it stops trying to do the auto completion for me. I'm going to check for arguments less than 1, and if that's true, that means there were no command line parameters passed. So what I'm going to show you here is how to hard code a file name in the program and how to pass a file name at the command line. And it checks first to see if we do have any command line parameters, and it will prefer that over the internal hard-coded name that I'm typing in right now. So the logic basically states, if there are no command line parameters, let's hard-code the file name. And notice I've changed the if formatting because it's such an if, short if clause. I can put it all in one line, and I can do the else and put it all in one line. So now I'm starting to show you some of the style that programmers use in industry, because a lot of times you want to express yourself very concisely. So you don't always go down the page to show the if-else structure. Sometimes you do it just like this if it's short and very understandable. Now, since we're using command line parameters, arg0, I'm going back up to main and I'm declaring the string array called args. That's how we access the command line environment that's passed to our program when we execute the program. I'm going to go ahead and put in a comment here so you can, it's always good to look at the comment and get the idea of what is it that the code following actually does at a very high level. So we're going to set the file name based on whether or not we see command line parameters. Okay, now here's where we're going to check for the file existence, because we don't want to accidentally clobber an existing file. If we didn't check for the existence, we just keep writing over the file, and maybe the file is a useful file and we don't want to just automatically do away with it. So file is the class that comes from system.io, exists as a method. We pass it the file name. It goes off and checks the operating system to see if we actually have a file there. If this test returns true, then we go into the if block, and that means that we do have an existing file. So now we need to communicate with the user, and we need to ask them or alert them and say, hey, this file exists already. Do you want me to overwrite it? Looks like I have lots of red squiggles, so I've got to go back and fix this. That's one thing about the IDE is it keeps trying to do a lot of completion, and so if you're typing fast like I am, sometimes you can get ahead of yourself and the auto-completion will kind of do things for you. So we're going to use the interpolated string syntax with the $sign. That allows us to put file name in curly braces and get the actual hard-coded file name or the name of the file that was passed on the command line. Okay, so then after I ask the question, I need to have a place to store it. So I'm going to read the keyboard stored in answer. So I'm jumping up top and I'm actually declaring answer, which I will default to no, because we don't want to assume on behalf of the user that they want to just overwrite a file silently. So we're just going to say yes, or I'm sorry, set it to no, and then let the user decide if they want to overwrite the file or not. It's not for the programmer to say, it's really for the user to say. Now this is where we check for the returned keyboard input, and I meant to type not equal. There we go. So if the answer is not equal to a lowercase y, and the answer is not equal to an uppercase y, then the user doesn't want to overwrite the file, and so we need to exit the program, so that because there's nothing else that our program actually does. Nothing went wrong, so I'm passing a 0 success code up to the operating system that called this program. Any other input, N, or it doesn't matter what other keys are pressed by the user, if they don't type a Y, then we're going to exit the program. But if they do type a Y, they must know what they're talking about and they want to overwrite the file. And so then flow would continue down to the next statement where we create the file stream object called file. We use the file name that was either hard-coded or passed in on the command line. We then wrap the file stream object in a stream writer object. This is a C# idiom where you see these two together quite frequently. Now, I'm going to create an array of strings, and that's what we're going to actually write to the file. Now, typically, when we're doing code blocks, I like to have the curly braces underneath. But as you see here, I backspaced to bring the left curly brace up to the same line as the identifier. Since this is an initializer block, I just like that format better because it tells my eyes right away that I'm initializing an array versus setting aside a code block. Now, notice that I put spaces in after Mickey and I counted so that I knew that the width is 10. I want all of the names to have a fixed width field of 10 characters. And the reason for that will become evident in the next lecture video. Okay, so the good old standards, Mickey, Minnie, Donald, Daisy, Goofy, and Pluto. And then notice, because this isn't a code block, it's actually the initialization of an array of strings. There's a little red squiggly under the last curly brace because it's expecting a semicolon. It's the end of a statement. The end of a code block, however, right below, does not need a semicolon. Okay, so now we're going to loop through the array. So I'll set up a for loop, and I'll declare x to be equal to 0, so we'll count from 0 and check to see that x is less than names.length, which is the number of strings in the names string array. And then I will write out names in the subscript, so it will cycle from 0 to 1 less than names.length. And then, since we're using the writer object write line, it's not going to write it to the screen, it's going to write it to the file or the stream. We'll go ahead and close writer, we'll close file, and now we're done. So now let me go execute this program. I'll just execute it this time with debug, and it's just going to blow by real fast. Okay, it's done. Now let me go to the File Explorer and let's see if the file was actually created. Sure enough, there it is. Look at the date and timestamp. It matches. There's the contents of the file. Okay, now the file exists. So let me rerun the program. I'll do it so that it will stop this time. And notice it's showing me the file name and it's asking me, hey, do you want to overwrite this, yes or no? So I'm going to say yes. And now, if you look at the file's time and the time there, you can see that it was just written and it's got the same contents, but it was a new file. Now, let's actually pass a file name on the command line. So I'm going to go to the solution viewer. I'm going to right click on properties. I'm going to select debug, and now I'm going to type in a name to be passed in from the command line. Since we're in the IDE, we have to put it here. When we're at the command line interface, we just type it in the black window after the command name. But this is how we tell Visual Studio IDE to pass in a command line parameter. Okay, so now I'll run the program again. We know that file doesn't exist. Okay, now let's go check File Explorer, and look, now it exists. And let's look at the time. Okay, 7:49. Look at the contents. Notice the cursor. It has spaces after Mickey, spaces after Minnie, so they're all 10 characters wide. Now this new file exists, the one that we get from the command line arguments. And I'll show you again. I'll right click on properties. I'll open it up. Notice we still are passing command line arguments. Only this time that file already exists. So we should expect it to ask us a question. So it checks. It says, hey, this exists, just like it did with the hard-coded file name. And notice it's 750. I'll go ahead and say yes. Okay, and now let's go back to File Explorer, and sure enough, the timestamp is now 750 on the file, and we're done. Hope you enjoyed this video.